the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a priceless painting vanishes from the Harrington Art Gallery, leaving a guard battered and a mystery brewing. Was it the desperate artist, the scheming curator, the ambitious heiress, or the unassuming cleaner? As whispers of greed and loyalty swirl, Miss Marple unravels a web of secrets, where a mother's love turns deadly. In 30 seconds, dive into a classic Agatha Christie-style whodunit, where every clue points to betrayal, and the truth hides in plain sight. Chapter 1. The Vanishing Masterpiece. The autumn mist clung to the cobblestone streets of St. Mary Mead, like a reluctant visitor, softening the outlines of the ancient cottages and the steeple of St. Mary's Church that pierced the grey sky. It was a village where time seemed to linger, where the rhythms of daily life were as predictable as the tolling of the church bells, until the morning when the unthinkable occurred at the Harrington Art Gallery, nestled in the converted manor house. On the outskirts, the gallery had long been a source of quiet pride for the villagers. Its collection, though modest, included treasures gathered over decades by benefactors with a taste for the finer things. The latest acquisition, however, had stirred unusual excitement. Whispers of the Veil, a masterpiece by Elias Thorne. The painting depicted a serene English countryside, with rolling hills shrouded in fog, distant villages hinted at through veils of light and shadow, and an undercurrent of mystery that drew the eye inward, as if secrets lay buried in the brushstrokes. Thorne, a local son who had risen to fleeting fame in London salons, had loaned it for exhibition, hoping to revive his flagging career. The gallery's opening hours had ended the previous evening with the usual trickle of visitors, art enthusiasts from nearby towns, a school group sketching in notebooks, and a few locals paying their respects. Mr. Reginald Hargrove, the curator, had seen them all out with his customary precision, adjusting his monocle as he locked the heavy oak doors. "Good night, Jenkins," he had called to the night guard, Harold Jenkins, a sturdy man in his 50s, with a mustache like a hedge, and a fondness for his thermos of strong tea. Jenkins had nodded, settling into his routine patrol of the echoing halls, where the portraits on the walls seemed to watch with painted eyes. But dawn brought chaos. The milkman, delivering his rounds, heard a faint groan from within the building, and alerted the constable. Slack, the local officer, a man more at home with poachers than felons, forced the door and discovered Jenkins sprawled on the marble floor of the main exhibition room, a livid bruise blooming across his forehead. Blood trickled from a shallow cut, and his uniform was disheveled, as though he had struggled briefly. The alarm, a simple bell system wired along the walls, hung silent, its cords neatly severed with what appeared to be a sharp blade, and there, on the far wall, the ornate gilt frame that had held Whispers of the Veil gaped empty, like a window stripped of its glass. Shards lay scattered below, catching the morning light in mocking sparkles. No forced entry marked the windows or doors. The theft had been executed with an insider's cunning. News spread through St. Mary Mead, like wildfire through dry thatch. By breakfast time, the village shop buzzed with speculation. "Jenkins is lucky to be alive," murmured Mrs. Price, the postmistress, as she handed out stamps. "They say he was coshed. Proper might have been murder if the blow was harder." Her customers nodded gravely, their minds racing to the obvious question: who would dare such a thing in their peaceful haven? The suspects emerged naturally from the gallery's inner circle. Hargrove, the curator, with his impeccable suits and air of scholarly detachment, had overseen the painting's installation himself. Whispers abounded of his financial woes, the gallery's endowments dwindling in the face of rising costs. Then there was Thorne, the artist, whose bohemian ways and rumored debts painted him as a man desperate enough to reclaim his own work for a quick sale. Lady Victoria Beaumont, the affluent widow from Beaumont Hall, had attended the unveiling with undisguised avarice, her bids to purchase the piece rebuffed by Hargrove's insistence on public display. And lurking in the background was Mrs. Elsie Potts, the cleaner, a widow in her 60s who arrived each dusk with her bucket and mop, her presence so unremarkable that she might as well have been part of the furniture. In her cozy cottage at Danemead, Miss Jane Marple sat at her breakfast table, the lace curtains filtering the misty light onto her china teacup. Her maid, Dolly Young, efficient, and ever the bearer of tidings, bustled in with a tray of toast and marmalade. "Oh, miss, have you heard? The gallery's been robbed. That lovely painting gone, and poor Mr. Jenkins laid out cold. Constable Slack says it's professionals from London. Mark my words." Miss Marple poured her tea with steady hands, her frail appearance belying the keen intelligence in her bird-like eyes. She was an elderly spinster, her white hair neatly pinned, her knitting basket always close at hand. To the casual observer, she was merely a relic of a gentler age, fond of her garden and the church flower rhoda. But those who knew her, and there were few, recognized the razor-sharp mind that unraveled knots others deemed impossible. "Indeed, Dolly," she replied in her soft, precise voice. "Most distressing. Do tell me all you've heard." As Dolly recounted the details gleaned from the baker's wife, who had it from the milkman, Miss Marple listened attentively, her fingers absently tracing the pattern on her saucer. The assault on Jenkins troubled her. Theft was one thing, but violence suggested a deeper desperation. "People are so careless with their secrets," she mused aloud once Dolly had finished. "They think a locked door hides everything, but it's the little things, the overlooked details that betray them." Outside, the mist began to lift, revealing the village in sharper relief. But the shadow of the crime lingered, a puzzle waiting to be pieced together. Miss Marple set down her cup, her thoughts already turning to the gallery and the web of human frailties that had led to this vanishing act. Chapter 2. The Arrival of Suspicion. The morning mist had burned away by the time St. Mary Mead fully awoke to the scandal at the Harrington Art Gallery, leaving the village bathed in the pale, uncertain light of an October sun. The cobblestone lanes buzzed with a fervor rarely seen outside the annual flower show, as neighbors gathered in knots outside the butcher's and the tea shop, their voices low but urgent. The theft of Whispers of the Vale was no mere pilfering, it was a violation, a wound to the village's pride, and the assault on poor Harold Jenkins added a sinister edge to the affair. Speculation swirled like leaves in the autumn breeze, each theory more elaborate than the last. Had a gang of London thieves descended under cover of night? Was it an inside job, orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of the gallery's workings? Or, as Mrs. Bantry from the Manor House suggested over her morning post, could it be a jealous rival of Elias Thorne, determined to ruin his moment of triumph? At Danemead Cottage, Miss Jane Marple sat in her chintz-covered armchair by the window, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on a pale blue shawl for a neighbor's newborn. Her maid, Dolly, bustled in with a tray of Elevence's cones and a pot of Earl Grey, her cheeks flushed with the latest gossip. "There. Saying it's a professional job, miss," she announced, setting the tray on the lace-draped table. "Constable Slack's been up to the gallery, but he's all at sea. Says the doors were locked tight, no windows broken, and yet that painting's gone like it sprouted legs." Miss Marple's bright blue eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, flickered with interest. "Dear me, Dolly," she murmured, pouring tea with the precision of long habit. "Locked doors and no signs of entry. How very curious. It reminds me of that affair with Mrs. Eldridge's silver teapot, you know. Everyone assumed a burglar, but it was the nephew, slipping out with the key from her bureau." She paused, her lips pursed thoughtfully. "People are so predictable in their carelessness. A locked door is only as secure as the person who holds the key." Dolly, accustomed to her mistress's penchant for drawing parallels between village peccadilloes and grander crimes, nodded eagerly. "They've called in an inspector from Scotland Yard, Miss Critic. His name is arrived this morning, all businesslike with a notebook and a frown. He's questioning everyone. Mr. Hargrove, Mr. Thorne, Lady Beaumont, even Mrs. Potts, the cleaner. Imagine, suspecting Hershey's quiet as a mouse. Miss Marple's needles paused mid-stitch. Quiet people are often the ones to watch. Dolly, she said softly. They see everything and say nothing, which makes them rather dangerous when they choose to act. She resumed her knitting, but her mind was already sifting through the names Dolly had mentioned, each a thread in the tapestry of this peculiar crime. By noon, the Harrington Art Gallery had become a hive of activity, its usual serenity shattered by the comings and goings of curious villagers, a handful of reporters from the county paper, and the purposeful stride of Inspector Critic, a tall man in his early 40s, with a lean face and eyes that missed little. Critic carried an air of quiet competence that contrasted sharply with Constable Slack's flustered demeanor. He had dealt with St. Mary Mead before, most notably during the curious case at Gossington Hall, and knew better than to underestimate the village's capacity for intrigue. As he stood in the curator's oak-panelled office, now converted into a makeshift interrogation room, he surveyed the four individuals before him, the key figures in the gallery's orbit, each a potential architect of the theft. Mr. Reginald Hargrove sat behind his desk, his posture rigid, his monocle catching the light from a leaded window. A man in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and a mustache trimmed to mathematical precision. He exuded the authority of one accustomed to ruling his small domain unchallenged. Yet there was a faint sheen of perspiration on his brow, and his fingers drummed an unsteady rhythm on the blotter. "I assure you, Inspector," he said, his voice clipped, "I locked the gallery myself at 6 o'clock yesterday evening. Every door, every window secure. The keys never leave my possession." He patted his waistcoat pocket, where a faint jingle betrayed the presence of the keyring. "Whoever did this must have had extraordinary skill, or a duplicate key, which is impossible." Craddock's pencil scratched in his notebook. "Impossible, Mr. Hargrove. That's a strong word. Keys can be copied, or perhaps misplaced." He fixed the curator with a steady gaze. "You were the last to leave, you say. Did you see Mr. Jenkins before you departed?" Hargrove adjusted his monocle, a gesture that seemed more nervous than necessary. "I did. He was at his post in the foyer, thermos in hand, as always. A reliable man, Jenkins. I can't imagine how anyone got past him." Across the room, Elias Thorne leaned against the wall, his lanky frame slouched in a pose of studied nonchalance. His dark hair was unkempt, his tweed jacket patched at the elbows, and a cigarette dangled from his lips, its smoke curling lazily upward. At 35, Thorne was a man whose early brilliance had been eclipsed by years of erratic output and rumored dissipation. His eyes, a piercing green, held a mix of defiance and weariness. "This is all nonsense, Inspector," he drawled, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Why would anyone steal my painting? It's not as if it's the crown jewels." Whispers of the veil. Is art not currency? But his casual tone faltered slightly, and Craddock noted the way his fingers twitched, as if itching to paint or to hide something. "You're not suggesting it walked out on its own, Mr. Thorne?" Craddock asked dryly. "You've been vocal about your dissatisfaction with the gallery's terms. Perhaps you had reason to reclaim your work." Thorne's laugh was sharp, almost bitter. "Reclaim it? And do what? Hang it in my cottage? I'm an artist, not a thief. Besides, I was in my studio all night, working on something new. Ask anyone in the village. They'll tell you I'm a night owl." Lady Victoria Beaumont, seated in a high-backed chair, with the poise of a duchess, fanned herself gently with a lace handkerchief. Her auburn hair, swept into an elegant chignon, gleamed under the chandelier, and her emerald green dress was a quiet statement of wealth. Widowed at 40, she had inherited a fortune from her late husband's shipping ventures, and her presence in St. Mary Mead was as much a curiosity as the gallery itself. "Inspector," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "This is a tragedy. That painting was a masterpiece, and I had hoped to acquire it for my collection. I offered Mr. Hargrove a substantial sum, but he was determined to keep it for public view." She sighed, her diamonds catching the light. "If it's gone, it's a loss to us all." Critic raised an eyebrow. "A substantial sum, Lady Beaumont. Enough to tempt someone to steal it, perhaps. Where were you last night?" Her fan paused mid-motion, but her smile remained serene. "At home, Inspector, in Beaumont Hall. My butler can confirm I retired early after a quiet supper. I have no need to steal what I can afford to buy." In the corner, almost invisible against the dark wood paneling, stood Mrs. Elsie Potts, the gallery's cleaner, a slight woman in her 60s, with gray hair tucked under a faded headscarf and hands roughened by years of labor. She seemed to shrink under scrutiny. Her apron was spotless, her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. "I left at 6, sir," she said softly when Critic turned to her. "Cleaned the floors, dusted the frames, same as every night. Didn't see nothing out of place." Critic studied her for a moment. "You have access to every room, Mrs. Potts. Did you notice anything unusual? A stranger lingering, perhaps, or a door left ajar?" She shook her head, twisting her apron between her fingers. "No, sir. It was all as it should be. I locked the back door myself before I went home." As the interviews concluded, Critic dismissed the group, his mind already cataloging inconsistencies. Hargrove's insistence on the keys' security was too emphatic. Thorne's alibi too convenient, Lady Beaumont's composure too polished, and Mrs. Potts's meekness almost too perfect. He stepped outside to confer with Slack, who was directing a constable to cordon off the gallery's entrance. "We'll need Jenkins's statement as soon as he's able," Critic said. "And I want those keys examined. If there's no sign of forced entry, someone had access or planned it well." Meanwhile, Miss Marple had made her way to the gallery under the guise of admiring the remaining exhibits. Her black umbrella tapped lightly on the gravel path as she approached. Her figure, a familiar sight in her tweed skirt and sensible shoes. The young constable at the door, recognizing her as a harmless village fixture, let her pass with a nod. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old canvas, though the emptiness of the main exhibition wall was a stark reminder of the crime. Miss Marple paused before the vacant frame, her head tilted as she studied the shattered glass on the floor below. "How very careless," she murmured to herself, bending slightly to inspect the shards. They were scattered unevenly, as if swept aside in haste, and a faint smear of something grease perhaps caught her eye on the edge of one piece. She straightened, her mind turning over the details Dolly had shared. The severed alarm wires, Jenkins's injury, the absence of obvious entry points. It was all so theatrical, she thought, like a play staged for an audience. But who was the director? She wandered toward the curator's office, where voices carried through the half-open door. Critic was speaking to a junior assistant, a nervous young woman named Clara, who managed the gallery's bookings. "Mr. Hargrove was here late last week," Clara was saying, her voice trembling slightly. "Going over the accounts, he was. Said we were in a bad way, what with the heating costs and all." Miss Marple lingered, just out of sight, her presence unnoticed. Accounts, she thought. A gallery in financial trouble might tempt a curator to drastic measures. Insurance, perhaps. But the violence against Jenkins suggested more than a simple fraud. She recalled a similar case in the village years ago, when a churchwarden had staged a theft to cover his gambling debts, only to be undone by a forgotten receipt in his pocket. People always leave something behind, she mused, as she left the gallery. Miss Marple encountered Mrs. Bantry, her old friend, who was hurrying toward the tea shop with a gleam of excitement in her eyes. "Jane, you've heard, of course," Mrs. Bantry exclaimed, her hat slightly askew. The whole village is in a tizzy. I wouldn't put it past that Thorn fellow, always struck me as shifty. Or perhaps Lady Beaumont, throwing her money about like confetti. What do you make of it? Miss Marple smiled faintly. I make very little of it yet, Dolly, she replied, using her friend's pet name. But I find it interesting that everyone seems so eager to point fingers. It's like that time with the vicar's missing candlesticks. Everyone had a theory, but no one looked at the verger's boy, who was saving for a bicycle. Her eyes twinkled. We shall see what the inspector uncovers. He's a clever man, but he sometimes misses the human side of things. Double quotes. Mrs. Bantry laughed. You and your parallels, Jane. I swear you could solve a murder with nothing but a knitting pattern and a cup of tea. She linked arms with Miss Marple, and they strolled toward the village, the gallery looming behind them like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Back at Danemead, Miss Marple settled into her armchair, her knitting resumed. The suspects danced in her mind like characters in a novel, each with their own motives and masks. Hargrove's financial strain, Thorn's desperation, Lady Beaumont's ambition, Mrs. Potts's invisibility held a piece of the truth, but which piece fit where? She thought of Jenkins, lying in the hospital, and the shadow he claimed to have seen. Shadows, she knew, were cast by something solid, something real. And in St. Mary Mead, where secrets hid in plain sight, Miss Marple was certain the truth was closer than anyone suspected. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Gallery. The afternoon sun slanted through the mullioned windows of the Harrington Art Gallery, casting elongated shadows across the polished parquet floors that seemed to mimic the elusive figures at the heart of the mystery. Inspector Critic, his brow furrowed in concentration, knelt beside the empty frame where whispers of the veil had hung, his magnifying glass hovering over the scattered glass shards. Constable Slack hovered nearby, notebook at the ready, though his expression suggested he was more accustomed to directing traffic than dissecting crime scenes. No fingerprints on the frame, sir, Slack reported, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. Just smudges could be from the cleaning cloth, or gloves, perhaps. Critic straightened, dusting off his knees. Gloves would indicate premeditation, Slack. And look, here the glass isn't just broken. It's been cracked from the inside, as if the painting was removed carefully first, then the frame disturbed to simulate a hasty theft. He traced the severed alarm wires with a gloved finger, noting the clean cut likely from shears or a knife, not the ragged tear of an amateur. The exhibition room, with its walls lined in deep burgundy velvet and pedestals bearing lesser sculptures, felt oppressively silent, as though the missing artwork had taken the gallery's soul with it. Harold Jenkins lay in a crisp white bed at St. Mary Mead's modest cottage hospital, a bandage wrapped around his head like a turban. His face, usually ruddy from outdoor pursuits, was pale against the pillows, and his mustache drooped forlornly. A nurse adjusted his drip, murmuring comforts, while Craddock pulled up a chair, his notebook open. Mr. Jenkins, if you can manage it, tell me what you remember. Even the smallest detail could help. Jenkins blinked slowly, his voice a hoarse whisper. It was around midnight, Inspector. I'd done my rounds, checked the doors, the windows all secure. Was back in the main room, sipping me tea, when I heard a noise. Soft, like a footfall on carpet. Turned, and there was a shadow, tall, indistinct, moving quick from the alcove. He paused, wincing as he shifted. Before I could shout, something pressed over me, mouth a cloth, smelling sharp, like turpentine or cleaning spirits. Struggled, but then a blow to the head. Stars, then nothing. Craddock leaned forward. The shadow man, or woman, any features, couldn't say. Dark clothes, maybe a hat or hood, but the smell, lingered in me nose. Jenkins's eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion claiming him. Outside the hospital, Miss Marple emerged from her visit, her basket now lighter without the grapes she'd brought. She had arrived earlier, slipping past the receptionist with the air of a concerned relative. "Poor Mr. Jenkins," she had said, perching on the bedside chair. "Such a shock for you. Do try these there from my own vine." As Jenkins nibbled, gratefully she steered the conversation gently. "That cloth, you say chemicals, reminds me of the time young Tommy at the chemist's mixed up a batch of liniment too strong. Burned the skin right off, it did." Jenkins had nodded weakly. "Aye, miss, stung me eyes, too." And the blow felt like a heavy object, not a fist. Miss Marple patted his hand. "Rest now. But think if it was someone familiar, might they have hummed a tune, or worn a particular scent?" Jenkins frowned, murmuring about a faint melody. But sleep overtook him before he could elaborate. Now, as she walked the leafy path back to the village, Miss Marple's mind buzzed with possibilities. Chemicals common in an artist's studio, or a cleaner's cupboard. And shadows. They were deceptive things, hiding as much as they revealed. She recalled the case of the shadowed figure at the vicarage fete, who turned out to be the organist. In disguise, pilfering the collection plate for his ailing sister. Always the personal motive, she thought, her steps measured. Back at the gallery, Critic expanded his examination. He interviewed Clara, the junior assistant, in the staff room, a cozy nook with a kettle and mismatched mugs. Clara, a mousy girl in her 20s with wire-rimmed glasses, fidgeted with her sleeve. "Mr. Hargrove was particular about the alarm," she said. "Tested it weekly. But last night, well, Mrs. Potts mentioned the wires looking frayed when she dusted." Craddock's interest sharpened. "Frayed? Did she report it?" Clara shook her head. "Said she'd mention it to Mr. Hargrove, but he was in a mood arguing with Mr. Thorne about commissions again." The inspector made a note. Arguments, frayed wires, potential sabotage. He moved to the storage room, where canvases leaned against walls like forgotten dreams. Here, he found traces of paint thinner on a rag, discarded in a bin. "Thinner," he muttered. "Matches Jenkins's description, but whose rag?" Thorne's studio reeked of such solvents, yet cleaners used similar for stubborn marks. As evening approached, the village grapevine hummed with fresh rumors. At the Blue Boar Inn, patrons clustered around pints, debating the crime. "It's that artist," declared the blacksmith, thumping his tankard. "Seen him skulking about at odd hours," the barmaid countered, "or Lady Beaumont, her chauffeur's van, could hide a painting easy." Laughter rippled, but unease lingered. Miss Marple, having tea with Mrs. Bantry at Gossington Hall, listened to the latest. The hall, with its sprawling lawns and Georgian facade, was a far cry from her cottage, but friendship bridged the gap. "Arthur says it's insurance," Mrs. Bantry confided, slicing cake. "Hargrove's been complaining about funds, but hitting Jenkins. That's vicious." Miss Marple nodded, her fork poised. "Vicious, yes. Or panicked. Planned crimes go smoothly. Impulsive ones leave marks." She sipped her tea. "Tell me, has anyone seen unusual visitors at the gallery lately?" Mrs. Bantry pondered. "Well, Lady Beaumont's been there often, pressing to buy. And Thorne stormed out after a row with Hargrove. Something about unpaid royalties." As Miss Marple departed, twilight deepened the shadows around the gallery. Craddock, lingering for a final sweep, switched on his torch, its beam cutting through the gloom. In the alcove, Jenkins mentioned, he found a overlooked clue, a single button, pearl-like, wedged in a floor crack. Not from Jenkins's uniform to find, perhaps from a woman's blouse, or a man's cuff. He pocketed it, his thoughts turning to the suspect's wardrobes. That night, in her cottage, Miss Marple sat by the fire, knitting forgotten in her lap. The shadows on her walls danced from the flames, reminding her of the gallery's deceptions. "A shadow in the dark," she whispered. But shadows need light to exist. Light reveals all. She resolved to visit Thorne's studio tomorrow. Artists she knew painted their truths in hidden strokes. The village slept uneasily, the mystery casting long shadows over dreams. But for Miss Marple, the pieces were beginning to align, like stars emerging from cloud. Chapter 4. The artist's alibi. The following morning dawned crisp and clear over St. Mary Mead, the kind of day that belied the undercurrents of suspicion rippling through the village. Birds twittered in the hedgerows, and the scent of freshly baked bread wafted from the bakery, but the chatter in the high street revolved solely around the gallery theft. At the police station, a converted cottage with a blue lamp swinging outside, Inspector Critic prepared for his next move. He had spent the early hours reviewing notes, the pearl button from the alcove, the chemical scent described by Jenkins, the paint thinner rag. Each clue pointed inward, toward those who knew the gallery's secrets. Deciding to press Elias Thorne first, Critic dispatched Constable Slack to summon the artist. Thorne arrived shortly after 10, his boots muddy from the path to his studio, a converted barn on the village fringe. He slumped into the chair opposite Critic's desk, lighting a cigarette without asking permission. "This better be quick, Inspector," he grumbled. "I've got a canvas waiting lights perfect this morning." Critic leaned back, his expression neutral. "Mr. Thorne, you claim you were in your studio all night. Can anyone verify that?" Thorne exhaled smoke, his green eyes narrowing. "Verify? I'm a solitary soul when I work. No wife, no nosy neighbors, close enough to spy. But why would I steal my own painting? It's absurd." "Perhaps to sell it privately," Critic suggested mildly. "Rumors say your finances are strained. Debts from London galleries, unpaid suppliers." Thorne's face darkened. "Rumors are cheap. Yes, I've had lean times, but Whispers of the Veil was my comeback. Stealing it would ruin me." He stubbed out his cigarette. "If you must know, I was sketching preliminaries for a new piece of portrait. The charcoal's still on my hands." Critic glanced at Thorne's fingers, noting the black smudges, but also the fresh scratches, thin lines, as if from thorns or wire. "Your studio's only a mile from the gallery. Easy enough to slip out, commit the deed, return." Thorne stood abruptly. "This is harassment. Unless you've evidence, I'm leaving." He stormed out, leaving a trail of tension. Meanwhile, Miss Marple embarked on her own inquiries, armed with a basket of scones. For the poor dear artist, after such a shock, she made her way to Thorne's studio. The barn stood amid overgrown fields, its doors ajar, revealing a chaos of easels, pallets, and half-finished canvases. The air was thick with turpentine and oil paint, a scent that prickled her nostrils. Thorne, surprised by her visit, wiped his hands on a rag. "Miss Marple too? What do I owe this?" She smiled benignly, offering the basket. "Just a neighborly call, Mr. Thorne. Such a dreadful business with your painting. You must be devastated." He accepted a scone, his manner thawing slightly. "Devastated? Furious? More like, that piece was my heart on canvas." He gestured to a cluttered table, where sketches lay scattered, misty landscapes akin to the stolen work. Miss Marple peered at them, her eyes sharp. "How talented you are! But these scratches on your hands, gardening, perhaps?" Thorne flexed his fingers. "Brambles in the path. I cleared some last evening. Needed a walk to think." "Last evening," she echoed innocently. "Before or after your studio time?" He hesitated. "After, I suppose. Around dusk." But his gaze shifted, and Miss Marple noted a fresh canvas in the corner, its surface pristine, untouched by recent work. As she departed, she pondered his words. Brambles convenient for explaining scratches that might come from handling a frame or cutting wires. And his alibi, so solitary, was as flimsy as tissue paper. It reminded her of the young painter in the village amateur dramatics, who claimed to be rehearsing alone but was really meeting a sweetheart in the woods. Back in the village, Critic visited the hospital again. Jenkins, more alert, recalled a bit more. The shadow moved light-footed, Inspector not heavy like a man in boots, and the cloth definitely chemical, perhaps chloroform mixed with cleaner. This led Craddock to the gallery's supply closet, where bottles of solvents and polishes lined the shelves. Mrs. Potts had keys to it, but so did Hargrove. A missing bottle of industrial cleaner caught his ill label faded, but the scent matched Jenkins's description. By afternoon, word reached Miss Marple via Dolly that Lady Beaumont's hosting a soiree tonight, to lift spirits after the theft. Everyone's invited even you, through Mrs. Bantry. Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. How kind. I shall attend. One learns so much at such gatherings. The soiree at Beaumont Hall was a glittering affair, the drawing room aglow with candlelight and crystal. Lady Beaumont, resplendent in sapphire silk, greeted guests with practiced charm. Thorne arrived late, nursing a drink in the corner. Hargrove mingled stiffly, his monocle flashing. Even Mrs. Potts was there, serving canapes on loan from her cleaning duties. Miss Marple, seated on a settee, observed the interactions. Thorne argued quietly with Hargrove near the fireplace. You owe me royalties, Reginald. While Lady Beaumont laughed too brightly at a guest's joke. Mrs. Potts moved silently, her eyes darting. Approaching Thorne, Miss Marple said, Your new work sounds promising. Do show it sometime. He shrugged. Perhaps. But inspirations fled with the theft. As the evening wore on, Craddock arrived uninvited, button in hand. Found at the scene, he announced, watching reactions. Lady Beaumont's hand flew to her blouse, a pearl button missing. Mine, she gasped. But I lost it days ago, missed have. Dropped it visiting the gallery. A plausible excuse, but Miss Marple noted Thorne's sudden pallor. Alibis were cracking, shadows lengthening. The artist's solitude might hide more than creativity. Chapter 5. The Buyer's Ambition. The sun climbed higher over St. Mary Mead, casting a golden hue on the manicured lawns of Beaumont Hall, where Lady Victoria Beaumont resided in splendid isolation. The hall itself was a testament to old money of weathered stone, ivy-cloaked walls, and gardens laid out with geometric precision by a long-dead landscaper. Inside, the drawing rooms brimmed with antiques and artworks collected from across the empire, each piece a silent boast of her late husband's acumen and her own discerning eye. But on this particular day, the opulence felt shadowed by the events at the gallery, and Lady Beaumont's usual composure masked a growing unease. Inspector Craddock arrived unannounced shortly after luncheon, his car crunching on the gravel drive. The butler, a stoic figure named Wilkins, ushered him into the conservatory, where Lady Beaumont sat amid exotic ferns, perusing a catalogue of upcoming auctions. She looked up with a practiced smile, setting the catalogue aside. Inspector, what? A surprise tea? Or perhaps something stronger? Craddock declined politely, taking a seat opposite her. Lady Beaumont, I won't take much of your time. Your interest in Whispers of the Vale was well known. You made several offers to purchase it, all refused by Mr. Hargrove. She nodded, her fan fluttering lazily. Indeed, it's an exquisite work, evocative, timeless. I envisioned it in my collection, perhaps in the East Wing, where the light catches the mists just so. Her voice held a note of regret, but her eyes were watchful. And your whereabouts the night of the theft? Craddock pressed, notebook poised. As I told you, at home. Wilkins prepared supper, and I retired to my study with a book. He can vouch for me. He brought brandy at 10. She rang a small bell, summoning the butler, who corroborated her story with a deferential bow. Her ladyship didn't stir after that, sir. Craddock thanked him, but his mind noted the butler's loyalty. Servants often shielded their employers. as in the case of the embezzling footman he'd encountered years ago. "One more thing," he added, producing the pearl button. "This was found at the scene. Matches your blouse from the soiree." Lady Beaumont examined it coolly. "Yes, I noticed it missing after a visit to the gallery last week. Clumsy of me, must have snagged on a chair. But surely not evidence of theft." "Not alone," Critic conceded. "But combined with motive. ... She laughed lightly. "Motive, I could commission 10 thorns if I wished. Stealing is beneath me." As Craddock departed, he glanced at the garage, where a spacious van sat ideal for transporting large items discreetly. Motive, opportunity, and now a loose thread in her alibi. Miss Marple, meanwhile, pursued her own line of inquiry. Invited to Beaumont Hall for afternoon tea through Mrs. Bantry's connections, she arrived in her best hat, basket in hand. "Such a gracious invitation, Lady Beaumont," she said, settling into a wicker chair. "Your gardens are a delight." Lady Beaumont poured tea with elegant precision. "Thank you, Miss Marple. In these trying times, company is a balm. The theft has quite unsettled me." Miss Marple sipped delicately. "Unsettled, yes. You were so fond of the painting. I recall you at the unveiling, admiring it closely." She paused, one might say obsessively. A flicker crossed Lady Beaumont's face. "Art moves me deeply. My husband collected widely, but I seek pieces with soul. Thorne's work has that." As they chatted, Miss Marple's gaze wandered to the walls, noting gaps where paintings might have hung sold, perhaps. Village gossip, via Dolly, whispered of Lady Beaumont's investments souring. Stocks plummeted, estates mortgaged. "Your collection is impressive," Miss Marple remarked, "but maintaining it must be costly." Lady Beaumont's fan snapped shut. "One manages. Excuse me, I must check on the conservatory blooms." She excused herself briefly, leaving Miss Marple alone. Seizing the moment, Miss Marple glanced at the desk, where a telegram peeked from under a blotter. "Funds delayed. Urgent sale advised. From a London broker." Ambition, Miss Marple thought, could twist into desperation. Like the widow in the neighboring parish who forged a will to keep her manor. Upon returning, Lady Beaumont steered the conversation to lighter topics, but Miss Marple noted her hostess's clasped hands, knuckles white. Later, at the village shop, Miss Marple overheard more. Lady Beaumont's chauffeur had been seen driving toward London the morning after the theft. Van laden, probably. Errands, the shopkeeper said. But Miss Marple wondered. Craddock, cross-referencing alibis, visited the telegraph office. A message sent from Beaumont Hall at 11 that night, to a known art dealer. Item of interest available soon. Sent by Wilkins, on her orders. He confronted her again. Merely inquiring about another piece, she insisted. Coincidence. But Craddock pressed. "Your finances." Lady Beaumont tremors of strain. Her composure cracked. "Impertinent. My affairs are private." As evening fell, Miss Marple pondered over knitting. Lady Beaumont's ambition burned bright, but was it hot enough for crime? The button, the van, the telegram clues mounting like storm clouds. Yet something nagged. The violence against Jenkins seemed uncharacteristic of a refined lady. Perhaps an accomplice. The puzzle deepened, ambitions clashing like crossed swords. Chapter 6. The curator's secret. The clock in the Harrington Art Gallery's foyer ticked methodically. A steady reminder of time's inexorable march amid the frozen eternities captured on canvas. Mr. Reginald Hargrove's office, tucked behind a discreet door, was a sanctuary of order. Leather-bound ledgers stacked precisely. A desk calendar marked with exhibitions past and future, and a safe bolted to the wall, its dial gleaming under the green-shaded lamp. But on this overcast afternoon, order felt precarious. As Inspector Craddock rifled through the drawers with a warrant in hand, Hargrove stood by, his face a mask of indignation, monocle perched like a sentinel. "This is outrageous, Inspector. My private papers. Surely you don't suspect me of stealing from my own gallery?" Critic glanced up from a ledger, his eyes steady. "Suspect? Not yet. But the gallery's finances are pertinent. These entries show deficits, maintenance costs soaring, attendance down. And the insurance on whispers of the valet, tidy sum, payable on theft." Hargrove's mustache quivered. "Insurance is standard. Without it, we'd close doors tomorrow. But to imply fraud, I've dedicated my life to this place." The inspector flipped pages, noting irregularities, unexplained withdrawals, sums transferred to a personal account. "These miscellaneous expenses care to elaborate?" "A curator's discretion," Hargrove replied stiffly. "Restoration supplies. Petty cash." But his hands betrayed him, clenching the desk edge. Critic pocketed a receipt for a London club known for high-stakes cards. "Gambling, Mr. Hargrove. Debts can drive desperate acts." The curator deflated slightly. "A vice, yes, but settled weeks ago. Check with my banker." As Critic departed, he mulled the findings. Fraud fit the locked doors, the insider knowledge, but assaulting Jenkins. Hargrove seemed too fastidious for brutality, Miss Marple informed. By Dolly's network, the baker's wife had overheard constables gossiping, decided on a visit to the gallery. Posing as a donor inquiring about endowments, she was shown into Hargrove's office. "Such a charming institution," she said, seating herself. "You must be under dreadful strain." Hargrove, eager for patronage, poured tea. "Indeed, Miss Marple. Donations keep us afloat." His voice warmed, but shadows lingered under his eyes. She glanced at the safe. "Valuables secure, I hope, after the theft?" "Impenetrable," he assured, but his monocle slipped, a telltale tick-dot. As they talked, Miss Marple steered to personal matters. "A man of your standing family nearby?" Hargrove hesitated. "Widowed young, no children. The gallery is my legacy." But a framed photo on the desk showed a younger Hargrove with a woman, a seaside holiday faded, like forgotten joys leaving. Miss Marple noted the ledger peeking from a drawer, a page marked with red ink. "Deficits," she thought, "bred secrets, like the schoolmaster who embezzled funds for his invalid wife, undone by a misplaced IOU." That evening, Critic verified Hargrove's claim. Debts paid via a loan from a discreet source, Lady Beaumont. No, a London firm, but the timing days before the theft raised flags. Village whispers grew. Hargrove seen at the pub, downing whiskies uncharacteristically, Dolly reported. "He's aged overnight, miss. Guilty conscience." Miss Marple pondered by her fireside. Secrets layered like varnish on canvas peel one, reveal another. Hargrove's vice explained much, but not the chemical cloth or hummed tune, Jenkins vaguely recalled. The curator's secret might be a red herring, diverting from the true thief. A late telegram to Critic confirmed. Paint thinner traces in Hargrove's waste bin, not artists, but industrial. For cleaning frames he'd claim. But combined with opportunity. ... As rain pattered against windows, Miss Marple set aside her needles. The curator's facade cracked. But the puzzle's heart beat elsewhere in overlooked corners, where secrets whispered loudest. Chapter 7. The cleaner's routine. The modest cottage of Mrs. Elsie Potts stood at the edge of St. Mary Mead, where the village gave way to open fields dotted with sheep, and the occasional hawthorn hedge. It was a humble dwelling, its thatched roof sagging slightly under the weight of years. The front garden, a tidy plot of vegetables and hardy perennials that spoke of practical thrift rather than ornamental flair. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, carrying the scent of stew simmering on the stove, comforting domesticity that masked the growing scrutiny upon its occupant. Inspector Critic arrived as the afternoon waned. the sky heavy with the promise of rain. He knocked firmly, and Mrs. Potts opened the door, her apron dusted with flour, her expression one of mild surprise, tinged with wariness. "Inspector." "Come in, sir. Mind the step, it's loose." The parlor was neat but sparse, a worn settee, a sideboard with china ornaments, and a mantel clock ticking away the seconds. Critic took the proffered chair, declining tea. "Mrs. Potts, your routine at the gallery, walk me through it again." She sat opposite, hands folded in her lap. "Like I said, sir, arrive at 4, after the visitors, thin. Dust the frames, polish the brass, mop the floors. Leave by 6, locking the service door. Mr. Hargrove checks sometimes, but not always. And the supply closet. You handle the chemical solvents, polishes I. Restock when low. Nothing missing, far as I know." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flicked to the window, where a cat prowled the sill. Critic leaned forward. "Jenkins mentioned a chemical cloth, sharp smell, and a hummed tune, faint but familiar." Mrs. Potts paled slightly. "Tunes. I hum while working, old habits, but I was home by 7, with my supper." "Your family?" He probed gently. "You mentioned a son, Tommy. In London, working as a clerk. Visits rare." She twisted a ring on her finger, a plain band, tarnished with age, as Critic left. He noted the garden shed, its door padlocked. A constable's report later revealed Tommy Potts's record: minor thefts, associations with fences in the city. Motive, perhaps for a mother to aid a wayward child, Miss Marple. Hearing of this through Dolly, who had it from the grocer's delivery, boy called on Mrs. Potts with a jar of preserves. "A small gift, dear," she said at the door, "for your troubles." Mrs. Potts invited her in, the stew's aroma welcoming. "Kind of you, miss. Folks stare now, think I'm a criminal." Miss Marple settled by the fire. "People fear what they don't understand. Your work at the gallery's tedious but steady. Pays for the roof." She poured tea, her movements efficient as they sipped. Miss Marple glanced at a photo on the sideboard, a young man, smiling but with shadowed eyes. "Your son, handsome lad." Mrs. Potts's gaze softened. "Tommy, good boy, but life's hard in the city. Debts pile up." A sigh escaped her. "Debts," Miss Marple echoed mildly. "They can drive one to extremes. Like the farmhand who took eggs to settle his tab, harmless, until caught." Mrs. Potts stiffened. "I've done nothing wrong." Leaving Miss Marple inhaled deeply outside the faint whiff of chemicals from the shed, not garden tools. Routines, she thought, were comforting veils. Mrs. Potts's was impeccable. But cracks showed. The son's troubles, the access to supplies. The hummed melody Jenkins now identified as a folk air she favored. Critic, searching records, found Tommy's links to black market dealers, are forgers among them. A warrant for the shed revealed nothing overt, but a hidden compartment held wire cutters, blades sharp. Confronted, Mrs. Potts wept. "For Tommy, he's in trouble, but I swear, not the painting." Yet doubts lingered. Miss Marple, knitting that evening, unraveled a stitch. Routines hid deviations like a cleaner, lingering late, key duplicated. The net tightened, but the catch remained elusive. Chapter 8. Threads unraveling the Harrington Art Gallery. Usually a haven of contemplative silence, thrummed with an electric undercurrent as Inspector Critic orchestrated a reconstruction of the fateful night. He had summoned the suspects back to the scene under the pretense of clarifying time. But his intent was clearer: to observe reactions, to prod at alibis until fissures appeared. The main exhibition room, with its vacant frame mocking from the wall, served as the stage. Shafts of late afternoon light pierced the high windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like unspoken accusations. Mr. Hargrove arrived first. His steps measured, monocle in place like a shield. "This is irregular," Inspector, he protested. Mildly, though his voice lacked its usual authority. Elias Thorne sauntered in next, cigarette in hand, his disheveled appearance a deliberate contrast to the curator's precision. Lady Victoria Beaumont swept through the doors in a rustle of silk, her chin held high, fan tapping rhythmically against her palm. Mrs. Elsie Potts entered last. Quietly, almost apologetically, her eyes scanning the room before settling on the floor. Critic positioned them as per their statements. Hargrove at the door, simulating his locking routine. Thorne in the alcove, where he claimed to have lingered during a prior visit. Lady Beaumont before the empty frame, reenacting her admiration. And Mrs. Potts, with a mop in hand, mimicking her evening chores. Jenkins, still bandaged, but ambulatory, observed from a chair, his presence a grim reminder of the violence. "Let's begin," Critic announced, his tone crisp. "Mrs. Potts, you leave at 6. Demonstrate." She moved to the service door, turning the key with a click. But as she did, Thorne interjected sharply, "That's too convenient. Hargrove, you undervalued my work from the start. Perhaps you staged this to claim insurance and cut me out entirely." Hargrove's face reddened. Preposterous. "If anyone's desperate, it's you. Thorne debts mounting, talent waning. You'd sell your soul for a quick pound." Lady Beaumont's fan snapped open. "Gentlemen, please." Thorne's jealousy is evident. He couldn't bear the painting drawing crowds without his name in lights. Or perhaps an outsider, hired by a rival collector. Mrs. Potts remained silent, but her grip on the mop tightened, knuckles whitening. Miss Marple, invited as a neutral observer. Critic valued her insights from past cases, sat unobtrusively in the corner, her knitting needles clicking softly. She watched the barbs fly, each accusation a thread pulling at the fabric of deception. It evoked memories of the silver theft at the manor, where a trusted maid had pilfered heirlooms to fund her son's escape from creditors, her meekness a perfect disguise. Or the gardener at the vicarage, who faked a break-in to mask his own embezzlement. Undone by a stray footprint in the flower bed. The overlooked ones, she mused inwardly, carry the heaviest burdens and the cleverest schemes. As tensions peaked, Critic intervened. "Enough. This isn't a debate. Jenkins, from your vantage, does this align?" The guard nodded slowly. The shadow came from there, the alcove. Quick, light steps. Eyes turned to Thorne, who had been positioned there. He bristled. "Coincidence. I wasn't here that night." But Miss Marple noted Lady Beaumont's subtle glance toward Mrs. Potts and Hargrove's uneasy adjustment of his tie. Threads were unraveling, alliances fraying. Later, as the group dispersed, Critic confided in Miss Marple over a cup of tea in the staff room. A tip came in anonymously. A black market dealer in London, one Silas Crow, rumored to be fencing a Thorne landscape. Matches the description. I'm sending men tonight. Miss Marple set down her cup, her expression thoughtful. A wise move, Inspector, but tread carefully. Rumors can be planted, like seeds in fertile soil. Look closer to home first. The soil here is rich with secrets. He raised an eyebrow. You suspect misdirection? Always, she replied softly. Human nature loves a diversion. Recall the poacher who blamed foxes for missing hens while his larder bulged. Critic nodded, dispatching officers to London while tasking Slack with shadowing the suspects. That evening, as rain began to patter against the gallery's roof, a constable reported Mrs. Potts, seen posting a letter hurriedly, addressed to London, perhaps to her son, or to Crow. Miss Marple, returning home, paused at her gate. The threads were pulling taut, ready to snap. But which would break first, the artist's bravado, the lady's poise, the curator's facade, or the cleaner's silence? The web trembled, the spider poised. Chapter 9. Hidden Motives. The village of St. Mary Mead wore its evening hush like a familiar cloak, the lamps in cottage windows flickering against the encroaching dusk. Inspector Craddock, weary from a day of fruitless leads, made his way to Dane Mead Cottage, where Miss Marple awaited, with a pot of tea and a plate of shortbread. He had come to value her unerring instinct for the undercurrents of human behavior, those hidden motives that eluded official scrutiny. "Seated comfortably, Inspector?" Miss Marple inquired, pouring with steady hands. "You look troubled. The London tip, I presume?" Craddock nodded, accepting a cup. "My men raided Crow's warehouse, an illicit trove of forgeries and smuggled antiquities. But no sign of Whispers of the Vale. Crow denies knowledge, though he's in custody. Mentioned a contact, a young man with a nervous tic, offering a misty masterpiece for quick cash." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "A young man, Mrs. Potts's son, Tommy. Dolly mentioned his visits are infrequent, but perhaps timely." "Precisely," Craddock confirmed. "Records show Tommy Potts has a history fencing stolen goods in the East End. Debts to unsavory lenders, the sort who don't forgive lightly. If his mother stole the painting to bail him out." She nodded thoughtfully. "Mothers will go to extraordinary lengths. But let us examine the evidence afresh. The chemical cloth readily available in her supplies. The hummed Tungenkins now recalls it as the Bonnie Banks, a song she's known for, and her routine allows perfect access." Craddock spread his notes on the table. "Yet the others have shadows too. Thorns, scratches. He claims brambles, but a constable confirmed his garden path is clear. Perhaps from prying the frame. Hargrove's debt settled, yes, but via an anonymous loan traced to a shell account. Lady Beaumont's telegram item available soon could refer to the theft." Miss Marple set aside her knitting, her gaze distant. "Ah, but consider the inconsistencies. Thorne's studio yields fresh charcoal sketches, dated that night, tank still tacky when examined. An artist faking an alibi might overlook such details, but his passion rings true. Desperation, yes, but for creation, not crime." She paused, sipping tea. "Hargrove's loan check, the timing, paid weeks prior, before the painting's arrival. His gambling is a weakness, but reformed. The club manager vouches he hasn't played since. Insurance fraud demands staging, yet the assault on Jenkins was clumsy, not calculated. And Lady Beaumont," Craddock prompted. "Her ambition is for possession, not risk. The pearl button lost during a legitimate visit, as witnesses confirm. Her van's trip to London, delivering furniture. Receipts prove it. No, Inspector. Her flaws are vanity and extravagance, not thievery." Craddock rubbed his chin. "So the threads lead back to Potts. Her shed wire cutters found, matching the alarm sabotage. And that letter posted hastily to Tommy, warning him, or instructing delivery," Miss Marple suggested. "Hidden motives often stem from love twisted by circumstance, like the seamstress in the next parish, who embroidered secrets into linens to protect her brother from ruin undone by a loose thread." He rose, energized. "I'll confront her tomorrow, but gently, evidence first." As Craddock departed, Miss Marple gazed into the fire. Motives lay bare now, hidden no longer. The cleaner's unassuming facade concealed a fierce protectiveness, a willingness to cross lines for kin. The puzzle's edges aligned, the center clarifying. Tomorrow would bring revelations, but tonight the village slumbered, oblivious to the unraveling deceit. Chapter 10. The humming tune. The cottage hospital in St. Mary Mead exuded a sterile calm, its corridors echoing with the soft tread of nurses and the distant clink of trays. Harold Jenkins, propped up in bed with pillows, looked markedly returned to his cheeks, the bandage now a smaller affair. Inspector Craddock sat by his side, notebook at the ready, while a constable stood discreetly at the door. The breakthrough had come unexpectedly. During a routine check-in, Jenkins had stirred from a nap, humming a fragment of melody that had lodged in his subconscious. "That's it, sir. Jenkins said now, his voice stronger. The tune. The shadow was humming it softly, just before the cloth came down. The bonny banks o' Loch Lomond, an old Scottish air. My gran used to sing it. Craddock's pencil paused. You're certain? Not a radio, or imagination? Jenkins shook his head firmly. Clear as day now. Faint, but there. A woman's voice, I'd swear high, quavering. The inspector thanked him, mind racing. The tune was commonplace, yet in St. Mary Mead, associations narrowed it. Dolly, Miss Marple's maid, had mentioned Mrs. Potts favoring folk songs while mopping. Villagers recalled her lilting it at the church bazaar. Motive, opportunity. Now this auditory clue. The noose tightened. At Mrs. Potts's cottage, Craddock arrived with a warrant, slack in tow. She opened the door, flour on her hands from baking, but her face drained of color at their expressions. Inspector, more questions. Inside, if you please, Craddock said. Gravely, the parlor felt smaller, the clock's tick ominous. Mrs. Potts, Jenkins has recalled the hummed tune, the Bonnie Banks, your signature melody, by all accounts. She sank into a chair, hands trembling. Many know that song, means nothing, but combined with your access, the chemicals from your closet, your son's debts. Craddock laid out the evidence, wire cutters in the shed, Tommy's black market ties. The anonymous tip tracing to a payphone near her home. Tears welled in her eyes. Tommy's a good lad fell in with wrong sorts. Lenders threatened him, but I didn, single quotes T, ... I couldn't. Her voice broke, sobs racking her slight frame. Craddock waited, but she offered no confession, only denials laced with despair. Search if you must, you'll find naught. The search yielded little, a hidden envelope with cash, perhaps a down payment but no painting. As they left, Craddock pondered, genuine innocence, or a mother's cunning. Miss Marple, informed later, smiled faintly. Tunes linger, Inspector. Like echoes of truth, but echoes can deceive. The humming had pointed the way, yet the path twisted still. Chapter 11. Confrontation. The drawing room of the Harrington Art Gallery, repurposed for the occasion, held an air of finality, its velvet drapes drawn against the midday sun to create a somber intimacy. Inspector Craddock had arranged the chairs in a semicircle facing the empty frame, a visual accusation that loomed over the assembled group. The suspects, summoned once more, shifted uneasily. Mr. Hargrove, polishing his monocle with unnecessary vigor. Elias Thorne sketching idly on a notepad, his pencil scratching like a nervous heartbeat. Lady Victoria Beaumont fanning herself despite the cool room. And Mrs. Elsie Potts, perched on the edge of her seat, her hands clasped so tightly that veins stood out like cords. Miss Marple sat to one side, her presence requested by Craddock as a consultant of sorts, her knitting bag at her feet. She observed the scene with quiet acuity, noting the subtle glances exchanged, the artist's defiant stare at the curator, the lady's imperious lift of the chin, the cleaner's downcast eyes that occasionally darted toward the door as if plotting escape. Craddock cleared his throat, commanding attention. Thank you for coming. This isn't a social call, but a reckoning. The evidence has mounted, and it's time to lay it bare. He paced slowly, his voice measured. The theft was no outsider's work, no forced entry, the alarm cut with precision. An insider, driven by motive we've uncovered step by step. He turned to Thorne first. Mr. Thorne, your alibi held those sketches, time-stamped by a neighbor who heard your radio late into the night. Scratches from brambles, yes, but from clearing your path, not crime. Thorne exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. About time. Hargrove, next, Craddock's gaze steady. Your debts settled legitimately, Mr. Hargrove, the insurance tempting. But your dedication to the gallery, genuine late nights were for grant applications, not schemes. The curator nodded curtly, relief flickering behind his monocle. Lady Beaumont, Critic continued, your ambition for the painting was real, but your alibi solid. The butler's confirmation, the telegram about a different acquisition, the button a mere mishap. She smiled triumphantly, fan folding with a snap, as I maintained. All eyes shifted to Mrs. Potts, who shrank back. Critic's tone softened, almost regretful. Mrs. Potts, the threads lead to you. Your son's debts, 2 dangerous men, his black market contacts, the chemical cloth from your supplies, the wire cutters in your shed, and the humming tune, the Bonnie Banks, as Jenkins identified, a song you sing daily. She gasped, color draining. No. Miss Marple interjected gently, her voice cutting through the tension like a soft breeze. Dear Mrs. Potts, it's the little things that betray us. You duplicated the key weeks ago, perhaps during a quiet shift. Entered after hours, subdued Jenkins with chloroform-laced cleanerment. 2 days, not harm, but panic led to the blow with a heavy vase. Hid the painting in your shed, then passed it to Tommy for fencing. Tears streamed down Mrs. Potts's face. He was going to be hurt. Those lenders. I thought just once, for him. Critic nodded solemnly. The painting recovered from Crow's warehouse, Tommy in custody. You acted out of love, but crime it remains. As constables led her away, sobbing confessions spilling forth, the room exhaled collectively. Miss Marple rose, her expression compassionate. Love and greed entwine dangerously, Inspector. But truth prevails, as it must. The confrontation ended, justice served in the quiet way of St. Mary Mead. Chapter 12. Resolution. In the Valth, the days following the arrest brought a semblance of peace to St. Mary Mead, the kind that settles after a storm has passed, leaving the air clearer and the ground fertile for renewal. The Harrington Art Gallery reopened its doors with quiet fanfare, the empty frame now filled once more by whispers of the Vale. Recovered intact from the dingy London warehouse where Tommy Potts had stashed it among crates of dubious antiques. Elias Thorne's reputation, far from tarnished, soared on the wings of notoriety. The theft had transformed his work from local curiosity to national sensation. With offers pouring in from galleries in the capital, he was seen striding through the village with a newfound vigor, his sketchbook underarm, already envisioning a series inspired by the ordeal. Mr. Reginald Hargrove presided over the restoration with his customary precision, his monocle glinting as he directed assistants in rehanging the piece. The insurance payout, though unnecessary now, had been redirected toward much-needed repairs, a new alarm system, wired with the latest technology, and fresh coats of paint for the fading walls. Whispers of his past indulgences faded into irrelevance, overshadowed by the gallery's revival. Benefactors, stirred by the drama, pledged funds that promised a brighter future. Hargrove even allowed himself a rare smile during the reopening ceremony, where villagers gathered to toast the return of their treasure. Lady Victoria Beaumont, ever the picture of gracious defeat, attended the event in a gown of subdued elegance, her diamonds subdued in the afternoon light. She withdrew her interest in acquiring the painting with a public statement of delight at its safe return, though private murmurs suggested her financial woes had eased through a discreet sale of lesser items from her collection. No longer under suspicion, she threw herself into hosting charitable auctions at Beaumont Hall, her ambition channeled into philanthropy that burnished her standing in the community. As for Mrs. Elsie Potts, her trial loomed in the county court, but the village's sentiment leaned toward pity rather than condemnation. Her confession, wrung from a mother's breaking heart, painted a portrait of desperation. The duplicated key, the chloroform-soaked rag intended only to disorient, the panicked strike with a gallery statuette when Jenkins resisted. Tommy's involvement sealed her fate, yet pleas for leniency echoed from unexpected quarters. Jenkins himself, recovered and forgiving, spoke of her kindness in past years. Miss Marple, in a quiet letter to the magistrate, highlighted the corrosive power of familial bonds twisted by hardship, drawing parallels to cases where mercy had redeemed the fallen. In her cottage at Danemead, Miss Marple sat by the window, the pale blue shawl completed and folded neatly for delivery. Dolly bustled in with tea, her eyes alight with the latest news. The galleries buzzing, Mr. Thorne's painting a portrait of Lady Beaumont. Now says it'll capture her resilient spirit. And poor Mrs. Potsword, she'll get a light sentence. Community service perhaps. Miss Marple poured the tea, her movements unhurried. Human nature, Dolly, is a tapestry of light and shadow. Greed and love intermingle, leading us astray, but resolution comes when truths emerge from the mist. She gazed out at the vale beyond, its hills rolling gently under a sky streaked with sunset hues. Like Thorne's painting, life hides its secrets in plain view, waiting for the patient eye to discern them. The village returned to its rhythms, the church bells tolling, the market stalls opening, the gossip shifting to milder scandals. But Miss Marple knew the calm was temporary. Another puzzle would arise, as inevitable as the turning seasons. For now, though, the veil whispered of closure, its mists lifting to reveal the enduring beauty beneath.